In this video, we're going to review the process to find the equation of a perpendicular bisector. But the first thing that's important is to understand the process, or what even is a perpendicular bisector. So let's start right here where we have 2 points. I'll just call them A and B right now. And we're asked to find the perpendicular bisector of the segment. The first thing we need is our midpoint. So we're going to start off with our midpoint, which I'm going to call M, or I'll even just label it midpoint. And then the next thing I'm going to want to know is the slope of this line right here so that I can make my other one perpendicular. And when I draw my perpendicular line, I want to make sure that its slope is the negative reciprocal of this one. So the slopes have to be negative reciprocals. So step 1, midpoint. Step 2, find the slope of AB. And right here, this line right here is my perpendicular bisector. So I'm writing the equation of this one. So on this next slide, we have a graphic organizer of the steps. And there are really 4 steps involved always to do this. Our first step is to find the midpoint. That's going to go in our first box here. And recall that our formula for midpoint is x1 plus x2 over 2. And then y1 plus y2 over 2. And you can also think of this as averaging the x's and average the y's. A little easier than memorizing a formula. We're basically finding the halfway of the x's and the halfway of the y's. That's our midpoint. The next thing we want to do is find the slope of the segment. So back on our picture, that would have been the slope of AB. To do that, we need the slope formula, which is going to be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, or more simply, the change in y over the change in x. After we've found that slope, then we're going to come over here, we're going to determine the perpendicular slope. Well, that's going to be the opposite reciprocal of that previous slope. The last step is to take the midpoint here, the perpendicular slope here, and write the equation. And I would encourage you to use the point slope formula, y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. So let's try this out with this problem. Here we're asked to write the equation of the line that is the perpendicular bisector of the line segment connecting negative 3, 1 and negative 11, 5. I'm going to start off by I'm actually writing my work in those same boxes I had before. My first step was to find the midpoint. So I'm going to then take the x coordinates, negative 3 and negative 11, and find their average. And then the y coordinates, 1 plus 5, and find their average. So let's see, negative 3 and negative 11 is negative 14. Half of that is negative 7. 6 divided by 2 is 3. There's my midpoint. Put a box around that. I did my first step. My second step is to find my slope. I'm going to label that up here. And I'm going to subtract. My y's on top. Remember, it's delta y over delta x. So 5 minus 1 on top, and then negative 11 minus negative 3. So let's see, that's going to be 4 over, this becomes positive, so 4 over negative 8, or negative 1/2 is my slope. But then I'm interested in here in the perpendicular slope. And all I need to do is take that negative 1/2 and flip it. So when I flip it, it becomes a positive 2 over 1, or simply 2. My last step is to take my midpoint from the first box, my slope, that perpendicular slope from the last box, and write my equation. Y minus 3 equals 2 parentheses x plus 7. And I have my answer.